Female psychology. We think we understand it, but what if the most powerful forces shaping relationships and social dynamics are completely invisible to most people? Today we're exploring the hidden evolutionary patterns that no one talks about.
That's such a fascinating angle to explore. I'm especially curious about how these invisible dynamics play out in modern society.
Well, let's start with something mind blowing. Research shows women's brains have significantly higher densities of mirror neurons than men's brains, which fundamentally changes how they process social information and navigate relationships.
Could you break down what that actually means for our everyday interactions?
Think of mirror neurons as your brain's social radar system. They help us read emotions, predict behavior, and understand unspoken social cues. And women having more of these neural connections explains so much about female intuition and social strategy.
You know what's really interesting about that? It explains why women often pick up on subtle social dynamics that completely fly under men's radar.
Exactly. And this ties directly into something fascinating from evolutionary psychology. In ancient tribal societies, women couldn't rely on physical strength for survival, so they developed incredibly sophisticated social strategies instead.
That makes me think about how these ancient patterns show up in modern corporate environments. I've seen entire power dynamics shift through barely perceptible social moves.
Let's dive deeper into that because it connects to something called covert influence. Studies show that women are significantly more likely to use indirect methods to achieve their goals. Things like alliance building, strategic information sharing, and social positioning.
Oh my goodness, yes. I've noticed how female executives often accomplish more through careful relationship management than direct confrontation.
And here's where it gets really interesting. This ties into the concept of hypergamy, which is often misunderstood but actually represents a complex evolutionary strategy.
Well, that's certainly a loaded topic. How do you mean?
Research shows it's not just about seeking wealthy partners, it's about unconsciously evaluating potential mates across multiple dimensions: genetic fitness, social status, emotional intelligence, and resource potential. Studies indicate women make these assessments within seconds of meeting someone.
That's fascinating because it suggests these deeply ingrained patterns are still running in our modern brains, even when we're not aware of them.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is how these patterns manifest in female social hierarchies. Anthropologists have found remarkably similar social structures across different cultures and time periods.
You know, that reminds me of something I've observed. The way women often form complex alliance networks that can shift and reorganize based on subtle social cues.
And those social networks are incredibly sophisticated. Research shows women maintain an average of 5 to 6 close social bonds with intricate hierarchies of trust and influence.
So how does this play out in the age of social media? Because I imagine these ancient patterns have found new expression online.
Oh man, social media has essentially become a laboratory for female social dynamics. Studies show women are 62% more likely than men to use social media for relationship management and status signaling.
That's such a striking statistic. It really shows how these evolutionary patterns adapt to new technologies.
And here's something even more fascinating. Research indicates that women's emotional intelligence scores have actually increased by 15% over the last 3 decades, suggesting those social abilities are being enhanced by modern environments.
Well, that certainly explains the increasing sophistication of social navigation I've observed in younger generations.
Exactly. And it ties into something called the social brain hypothesis, which suggests human intelligence evolved primarily to handle complex social relationships rather than technical problems.
That's really interesting because it suggests these social abilities aren't just nice to have skills, they're fundamental to human evolution.
And what's particularly fascinating is how these abilities manifest in female friendships. Studies show women's same sex friendships are typically more emotionally intimate, yet also more strategically complex than male friendships.
You know what I find really compelling about all this? How understanding these patterns could actually lead to more authentic relationships.
That's precisely it. When we understand these underlying dynamics, We can make more conscious choices about how we engage with them rather than just unconsciously playing out evolutionary programs.
So, what's the key takeaway for people trying to navigate these complex social waters?
The research suggests that awareness is the critical factor. Understanding these patterns doesn't mean we're bound by them. It means we can choose how to engage with them consciously and intentionally.
That's really what it comes down to. Knowledge and awareness giving us the power to make better choices in our relationships and social interactions.
And perhaps most importantly, it allows us to build more authentic connections based on understanding rather than unconscious patterns and social scripts.